All right, hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Tuesday, August 10th, 2021. This is your evening tropical update, where tonight we continue to focus on what is still being called potential Tropical Cyclone Six, located near Puerto Rico this evening in the eastern Caribbean Sea. Maximum sustained winds around 35 or so miles an hour, but we still don't have that fully closed circulation we've been waiting on, so this isn't Fred yet. So we're waiting on the final word on when we're going to get Fred. It'll be sooner than later, but for now, we're still kind of using this silly labeling that we're using. But PTC 6 or 6 or Fred, whatever you want to call it, is still out there tonight and moving generally to the west northwest, and will still be impacting Florida later this weekend or early next week. That'll be most of the video. We'll also quickly hit this wave behind Fred that could also be a little concerning of an issue, and then we get the rest of your tropics coming up at the end of the video. So PTC 6 tonight, 8 p.m. advisory from the National Hurricane Center, 40 mile an hour maximum sustained winds actually, and that's mostly occurring to the north of the storm around Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. Some of those bands are producing tropical storm force winds, hence why we have the tropical storm watches in yellow and the tropical storm warnings in blue currently on your screen. However, the back half of the storm not really playing ball, so that's why we're kind of using this middle ground language again. But storm again tonight south of Puerto Rico is expected to move over Hispaniola, which is Haiti and Dominican Republic's island, on Wednesday tomorrow, and then expected to be moving into the Bahamas and Cuba Thursday into Friday, with it lurking somewhere off the coast of South Florida late on Friday, early on Saturday. And the crux of the whole argument tonight, guys, is Hispaniola going to actually disrupt PTC 6? Since we don't really have a storm yet, we have this nice tropical wave, but we don't really have a storm. Because there's a historical precedent for this island really wrecking storms. But then what does it look like after, and what do we have in the vicinity of Florida around this point in time? Is it an organized storm or is it a weak mess? So we'll talk about that a little bit. Let's go ahead and look at the last ASCAP pass. This is old. This is from earlier this morning about when the hurricane hunters were in there, but it illustrates it a little better than the hurricane hunter stuff does. They fly all over the place. But again, strong winds out of the east up here, turning more to the northeast and to the north, and then the winds do not wrap around the backside, and there's just this big nothing on the backside of the storm, and you just have what is still a nice trough axis. I mean, it looks pretty. It's a pretty storm. If I show you the satellite image, I mean, if you don't really know any better, I mean, if you showed me this with no context, I might tell you that's a tropical storm, or I might tell you that's a strong tropical storm, or at least a decent one. Beautiful bands, I mean, beautiful spiral bands coming out of the storm and all that. But then you look at under the hood, and it's like, oh, it's just a pretty car with no engine. That's essentially what this storm is tonight. This is mostly to blame due to the dry air in the vicinity of the storm. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. It was looking a little suspect because the water vapor wasn't showing a ton of dry air, and it still doesn't. And if you look at this again, you can see the dry air outline, but it's not super screaming at you. But then when you look at the GFS relative humidity chart model, you can see that yeah, there's a lot of dry air out ahead of the storm, and you can clearly see the wraparound where it's ingesting this air. This is pretty dry air, and what that dry air does is it chokes off the thunderstorms. The thunderstorms can't fire, and then the storm can't lower its pressure, and if it can't lower its pressure, it can't wrap up. It's kind of this like feedback loop. The storm passed over a buoy or two near Puerto Rico this afternoon, and the pressure falls were almost non-existent. So just tropical wave still. That's essentially what it is, but it's a very healthy tropical wave that's producing some tropical storm-like conditions on some of the islands. So the PTC label once again. All right, so let's go ahead and kick it up to getting across Hispaniola. So let's go ahead and do that. So we get it across Hispaniola. GFS on this run showing pretty much tropical depression. Same thing the National Hurricane Center is showing. They're showing it weakening to a depression for most of the day on Thursday, showing a very ragged storm. Now, again, there is a historical precedence for this. Let's show you Andy Hazelton's tweet earlier today. He screenshotted a map. This is the NOAA Hurricane Tracks map. It's pretty cool. If you Google like NOAA Hurricane Tracks, you get every historical storm in a point or in a year, whatever you want. It's really cool. But he showed you every storm that's landfalled or passed near South Florida within a certain like degree or radius at this point. There are no paths that show a storm coming over Haiti and the Dominican Republic and moving into the same area that PTC 6 is supposed to be in a couple days. All the storms that did it neither went south of the island or went north of the island. That is because that island is very mountainous, and those mountains destroy storms. Now, that caveat, of course, is that the storm has to be decently well formed. Well, what happens if PTC 6 isn't really a storm already? So like how much of this can you really disrupt if there's nothing to disrupt, especially on the surface? So that's kind of the fly in the ointment of normally if this is a healthy organized tropical storm, I would tell you, oh yeah, all day and twice on Sunday, this thing's going to get wrecked by the island. It's going to be a train wreck when it gets into the Bahamas, and then the wind shear probably tears it apart, and we're golden. But if there's nothing to destroy in the first place, it might just kind of slime around this island and kind of look the same as it does now, and then be able to take advantage of some better conditions in the Bahamas and whatnot, and then strengthen from there. So that's the first issue. The second issue is okay, then whatever storm we may or may not have getting towards Cuba and Florida, what does the conditions look like then? Well, there's going to be an upper level low over Florida. This is a wind shear map valid for Friday or Thursday night, Friday morning, in that range. Upper level low sitting over Florida, imparting some pretty healthy westerly wind shear over this part of the basin. At this point in time, PTC 6 should be somewhere near the eastern tip of Cuba in the southern Bahamas. Okay, so you can see here the storm's already kind of interacting with all this shear. The problem is this upper level low is already on station over Florida. You can see it sort of on the water vapor. It's centered right about here, and it's kind of doing this thing, and it's got some, so it's already kind of there. Okay, so by Thursday or Friday or Saturday, like this low is going to weaken and it's going to back up. So how much wind shear does it impart? And then what does PTC 6 look like? Is it a healthy storm when it gets right here? Or is it already a ragged mess and then it starts getting punched by the wind shear? Because that left hook, right hook from the island and then from the wind shear, if the storm's already fallen apart, may just kill it outright. I mean, we may have almost nothing here by the weekend. But if 6 does survive the islands and is a decent little vortex on Thursday and it starts spinning back up into even a low grade tropical storm by Thursday night into Friday, it may be able to kind of hang on until this wind shear abates, which looks like into Saturday, the upper level low by Saturday really begins to collapse by the afternoon, and it's showing more shear, like the colors brightened up, but it's not the same because the actual structure of what was causing the shear is falling apart. So now you're kind of seeing the upper level outflow from a developing tropical storm. So the wind shear basically is going to give up the goose by Saturday. So if the storm is not gone by then you have the potential for a storm tracking south of Florida and over the Florida Keys and into the eastern Gulf of Mexico, where water temperatures are red hot, moisture will be plenty and available, and the wind shear will abate. If the storm is still together at this point, it will be all lights will be green for strengthening, and we could potentially have a strong tropical storm or a hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico late this weekend or early next week. If it's falling apart and it's ragged, it may not be able to take advantage of this environment. So that's kind of what we're watching with 6 tonight. The bottom line, unfortunately, is until it gets over Hispaniola and kind of see what we're dealing with and what that wind shear looks like, we don't really know any more than that. I would say folks in Florida, especially the western part of Florida, the west coast of Florida, the western panhandle, you still need to be on a good amount of alert because this is probably going to come into your neck of the woods. The model trends have all continue to push off to the west a little bit more. The intensity guides hasn't really come up yet, but there's one model that's overshooting it. The rest of them are pretty much still in that tropical storm status, but they have come up a little bit. And the ensembles tonight from the Euro and the GFS still don't show a lot of strengthening of the storm, but they're generally beginning to show that more westerly track into the Gulf of Mexico. And again, this could still be a hurricane at that point in time, but there's a lot of roadblocks this thing's got to figure out how to get through to get there. So keep watching it. Keep an eye on it. It's definitely not the end of the world by any means, but don't be fooled by the raggedness, and don't be fooled if it's a tropical depression on Thursday and then somehow it's a hurricane on Sunday. I mean, that's still possible. And the rest of the Florida Peninsula definitely can still get some direct impacts, some tropical storm-like conditions, something like maybe what Elsa gave us, or more or less, depending on what the final trajectory of the track is. And if I was in Alabama or Mississippi or even maybe Eastern Louisiana in this region, I would be keeping a close eye on this because the trends are pushing your way, and it looks like if the trends are probably right because the storm is going to probably be weak for a couple days. The weaker the storm, the more it's going to want to kind of jog to the west. So I don't think the westward shifts are done just yet. So keeping an eye on this is really important in the southeast U.S., especially Florida, coastal Alabama, coastal Mississippi, and eastern Louisiana for now until we know more, until it gets off the island, and we go from there. So that's it for PTC 6 tonight, guys. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at the rest of the tropics real quick. We do have another wave following PTC 6. This is a 30% chance of development in the next 5 days. This wave is located here tonight in the main development region, and this one could be an issue because PTC 6 is really priming the atmosphere out ahead of the storm. It's moistening up the atmosphere. There's not a lot of Saharan dust outbreaks. The tropics are generally becoming more favorable. In another 5 days, the background state of this part of the Atlantic will be even more favorable for rising air and for tropical development. We're moving into a phase of the MJO. That's where the tropics basically wake up for a period, then they go to sleep for a period, like they slept for a month. Well, now they're going to wake up. They're continuing to wake up. So by the time this wave gets here, it could be an issue next week. So this wave will be one to watch. This is probably not going to go away, and this is probably going to start stealing headlines as soon as Fred's in or out of here or whatever it's doing. So it's on the back burner right now. It's still out there. It's not a big deal yet. It's thousands of miles away, but keep an eye on it because this one could be another player as we go into the weekend and next week. Go to the Eastern Pacific where we have two storms. Tropical Storm Kevin, not much to talk about here. Tropical Storm going on to a depression, moving offshore, and over cold water, going to dissipate. Behind it is Tropical Storm Linda. This is a nice, actually, little storm. This has got some northerly wind shear to deal with here this afternoon over Mexico and whatnot, but this is a big mess right here. It's going to definitely spin up into a decent storm. Could definitely be a hurricane. Hurricane Center does forecast to become a hurricane by Thursday afternoon. It could be a major hurricane, I think, in this region. But thankfully, we'll be also moving off to sea. Not going to be a big deal. And finally, we go to the Western Pacific, where all of our other tropical nonsense storms have moved off, but we do have Tropical Depression 16. This snuck up because it came from the Central Pacific Hurricane Center's area responsibility, and it kind of snuck out and is now over here. Joint Typhoon Warning Center thankfully does keep this as a weaker tropical depression, doesn't really forecast intensification, but these little waves can hold on, and they get near Guam sometimes, and boy, there's some warm water down here, and the conditions are even remotely favorable. They can get going, so we'll keep an eye on it, but it's not an issue right now. So that's what I got for you guys in your evening tropical update. As always, thanks for watching. Have a good one.